My name is Robert Harrison, and at 72 years old, I learned a painful truth. Sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for become the very people who betray you. The day my two sons left me at a nursing home, they acted like it was for my own good. They smiled, they hugged me, they promised they would visit every weekend, but the moment they walked through those doors, I knew I had been abandoned. What they didn't know was that 6 months earlier, I had made a decision that would change all our lives forever, and what happened 3 weeks later inside a downtown Columbus bank left both of my sons staring at me in complete shock, because the homes they lived in, the homes they proudly showed off to their friends, the homes they believed they owned, were never truly theirs, and the banker was about to reveal exactly who the real owner was. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Maybe a family member, maybe a friend, maybe even your own children? Let me know in the comments and tell us where you're listening from today. Texas, Florida, California, Ohio, New York, London, Manchester, or somewhere else in the world. Here at Family Revenge Chronicles, every story reminds us that actions have consequences. If you enjoy stories about family betrayal, inheritance drama, hidden truths, and emotional justice, subscribe and join our growing community. Now let me tell you how my own sons made the biggest mistake of their lives. Everything I built was for them. For 43 years, I owned Harrison Heating and Air. It wasn't a glamorous business. Nobody writes movies about air conditioning contractors, but it paid the bills. Every winter, while other people sat comfortably beside their fireplaces, I crawled through freezing attics repairing broken heating systems. Every summer, while families enjoyed vacations, I spent long days inside sweltering buildings fixing air conditioners. I worked because I had a dream, a simple dream. I wanted my family to have a better life than I did. My wife Susan shared that dream. We met when we were both 22. She was a school teacher, I was a young technician with a used pickup truck and more determination than money. Together we built a life. Then we had our first son, Michael. 3 years later, Jason was born. From the moment I held them in my arms, I promised myself they would never struggle the way Susan and I had struggled, and for many years everything seemed perfect. Birthdays, little league games, family vacations, Christmas mornings, the kind of memories every parent treasures. But looking back now, I realize the warning signs started much earlier than I wanted to admit. Michael always wanted more. The newest phone, the newest car, the biggest bedroom. Jason followed his older brother's example. Whenever one received something, the other demanded the same. Susan noticed it before I did. One night, after the boys had gone to bed, she looked across the dinner table and said something I'll never forget. "Robert, we're teaching them how to receive, but not how to appreciate." At the time, I laughed it off. I told her they were just kids. I wish I had listened. Years later, Susan passed away after a short battle with cancer. Losing her nearly destroyed me. For months, I wandered through our empty house feeling like a stranger. The silence was unbearable, but what hurt even more was discovering how quickly my sons changed after she was gone. The phone calls became less frequent, the visits became shorter, the excuses became more creative, and whenever they did visit, the conversations always seemed to return to one topic: money, the business, the house, my assets. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe my sons still loved me. I wanted to believe Susan's faith in our family hadn't been misplaced. Then came the conversation that changed everything. One Sunday afternoon, both boys showed up unexpectedly. They sat across from me at the kitchen table. Michael cleared his throat, Jason avoided eye contact, and I immediately knew something wasn't right. "Dad," Michael began carefully, "we've been talking." Whenever someone starts a sentence like that, trouble usually follows. I nodded. "What about?" Michael exchanged a glance with Jason, then he smiled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes, and what he said next would begin the chain of events that eventually led me to a nursing home. The plan they thought was perfect. "Dad," Michael said, leaning forward in his chair, "you're not getting any younger." I stared at him. Jason nodded as if rehearsing lines from a script. "We've been worried about you." That statement alone nearly made me laugh. For months, neither of them had called unless they needed something, yet suddenly they were worried. I folded my arms. Worried about what exactly? Michael sighed dramatically. "The house is too big for you." Jason jumped in. You live alone. You could fall. You could get hurt. You need people around. The concern in their voices sounded convincing, but something felt off. I spent my entire life reading people. Owning a business teaches you that skill. And right then, I wasn't looking at concerned sons. I was looking at two men trying to sell me something. I simply didn't know what. So what's your suggestion? I asked. The two brothers exchanged another glance. Michael smiled. We think you should sell the house. There it was, the real reason. Not concern, not safety, money. My home had been fully paid off for nearly 20 years. Property values in Columbus had skyrocketed. The house alone was worth over $800,000, and they knew it. I leaned back in my chair. And then what? Jason cleared his throat. There are some really nice retirement communities. Retirement communities. The phrase sounded harmless, but I could already see where this conversation was heading. Michael pulled out his phone. I actually found a few places. He immediately started showing photos, swimming pools, gardens, game rooms, smiling seniors. It looked like a luxury resort, almost too perfect. Dad, imagine how easy life would be. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked a simple question. How much would these places cost? The room became quiet. Michael looked at Jason. Jason looked at the table, and suddenly I knew. They weren't worried about my future. They were calculating their inheritance. The discussion continued for another hour. By the time they left, I had learned something important. My sons weren't interested in helping me. They were interested in controlling me. The next few months proved it. The pressure never stopped. Every phone call became another sales pitch. Every family dinner became another argument. Every visit somehow returned to the same topic: the house, the business, the assets. One evening, my granddaughter Emily accidentally revealed more than she realized. She was 16, honest, and unlike her father Michael, incapable of hiding what she thought. I was driving her home after a school event when she asked a strange question. Grandpa? Yes? When you move away, who gets your house? I nearly missed a red light. What move? Emily looked confused. The nursing home. I felt my stomach tighten. What nursing home? The color drained from her face. She immediately realized she had said something she wasn't supposed to. My dad said you were moving soon. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then everything became clear. My sons weren't discussing possibilities anymore. They had already decided my future without consulting me. That night, I sat alone in my living room thinking about Susan. If she had been alive, she would have seen this coming. She always understood people better than I did. I looked around the house we built together. Every wall held a memory. Every room carried a story. And for the first time, I seriously considered the possibility that my sons viewed those memories as nothing more than dollar signs. That realization hurt more than I can describe, but it also forced me to make a decision that would eventually change everything. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my banker. His name was Daniel Whitmore. We had known each other for nearly 3 decades. He handled both my personal finances and my business accounts. When I explained that I wanted a private meeting, he immediately agreed. 3 days later, I sat inside his office overlooking downtown Columbus. After listening carefully, Daniel leaned back in his chair. Robert, he said quietly, I think your instincts are right. I nodded. So what should I do? Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he asked a question that would change the course of our story. How much do you trust your sons? I looked out the window. The answer should have been easy, but it wasn't, because deep down I already knew the truth, and that truth frightened me. I don't know anymore. Daniel slowly nodded. Then he opened a file on his desk, and what he suggested next would become the foundation of the biggest surprise my sons would ever experience. The secret arrangement. Daniel Whitmore closed the office door before speaking. That alone told me the conversation was serious. For nearly 30 years, Daniel had managed my finances. He wasn't just a banker, he was a friend, one of the few people I trusted completely. He folded his hands on the desk. Robert, before I make any suggestions, I need to ask something. I nodded. Go ahead. If your sons inherit everything tomorrow, what happens? The answer came immediately. They sell it. Daniel nodded. The business? They sell that too. The house? Sold. The investments? Spent. Daniel sighed. Neither of us needed explained several options. To say the rest, everything Susan and I had built over 4 decades would disappear within a few years. The thought made my chest ache, not because of the money, because of what the money represented: sacrifice, hard work, family, dreams. Daniel opened another folder. Then maybe it's time you protect what you've built. I leaned forward. How? For the next hour, Daniel explained several options: trusts, asset protection, estate planning, ownership structures. Some were complicated, others were simple, but one idea stood out. An idea so clever I almost laughed when I heard it. By the time our meeting ended, a plan was already taking shape, a plan that would eventually leave my sons speechless. And the best part? Everything would be completely legal. Over the next 6 months, I quietly reorganized my finances. No one knew, not Michael, not Jason, not even most of my relatives. The house remained in my name, the business remained operational, nothing appeared different from the outside. But behind the scenes, important changes were being made, changes designed to ensure that greed would never be rewarded. Meanwhile, my sons became increasingly impatient. Every conversation revolved around the future, specifically my future, or rather, what they hoped would become their future. One evening, Michael invited me to dinner. At first, I thought he genuinely wanted to spend time together. I should have known better. Halfway through the meal, he casually mentioned a house, a very expensive house, 5 bedrooms, large backyard, excellent neighborhood, the kind of home most people dream about. It would be perfect for our family, he said. I nodded politely. Sounds nice. Michael smiled. We're thinking about buying it. I congratulated him, but then came the real reason for the conversation. The down payment is the problem. There it was, exactly where I knew this was heading. I remained silent. Michael continued. I figured maybe you could help. Over the years, I had helped him countless times. College tuition, car payments, business loans, home repairs, wedding expenses. The list seemed endless, yet somehow it was never enough. When I politely declined, his entire mood changed. The smile disappeared, the warmth vanished, and for a brief moment, I saw something ugly underneath. Entitlement, as if my money belonged to him. That realization stayed with me for days. Then Jason followed the same pattern, different request, same attitude. He wanted money to expand his landscaping company. Again, I declined. Again, disappointment quickly turned into resentment. Neither son seemed interested in me, only in what I could provide. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly their patience began running out. The phone calls became colder, the visits became shorter, the respect disappeared altogether. One afternoon, I overheard something that removed any remaining doubt. I had arrived early for Emily's birthday party. The backyard was full of relatives. Children running everywhere, music playing, people laughing. I was walking toward the patio when I heard Michael's voice through an open window. He didn't know I was nearby, neither did Jason. I don't know how much longer this is going to take, Michael complained. Jason laughed. Maybe another 10 years. Both men chuckled. Then Michael said something I'll never forget. At this rate, Dad's going to spend every dollar before we ever see it. The room erupted with laughter. My own sons, talking about my death as if they were discussing a delayed shipment. Standing outside that window, I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something worse, disappointment. The kind of disappointment that comes when reality destroys an illusion you've spent years protecting. For the first time, I accepted the truth. My sons weren't waiting to inherit my legacy. They were waiting for me to disappear. That night, I called Daniel. When he answered, I spoke only one sentence. Let's move forward with the entire plan. His response was immediate. I'll start tomorrow. Over the following months, every piece fell into place, quietly, legally, carefully, and all the while, Michael and Jason remained completely unaware. Then came the phone call that changed everything. A phone call that arrived at 7:14 on a rainy Tuesday morning. Michael sounded unusually cheerful. Dad, Jason and I need to talk to you. I instantly knew something was wrong. When? Today. His voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard in years, an excitement that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with opportunity. By that evening, both of my sons were sitting in my living room, smiling, confident, prepared. What they proposed next would eventually land me inside a nursing home, and it would become the biggest mistake they ever made. The day they took my freedom. That evening, Michael and Jason arrived carrying folders. Not photo albums, not family pictures, folders. The moment I saw them, I knew this wasn't a family visit. It was a business meeting, and I was the subject. Michael placed the folder on my coffee table. "Dad, we've done a lot of research." Jason nodded enthusiastically. "We found the perfect place." I already knew what they meant. The nursing home, or as they preferred to call it, a senior living community. Michael opened the folder and slid several glossy photographs toward me. Beautiful buildings, gardens, smiling residents. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. I studied the pictures without saying a word. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "What do you think?" I looked directly at him. "I think neither of you asked what I wanted." The room became uncomfortable. Jason cleared his throat. "Dad, we're only trying to help." Help. That word again. Funny how people always use the word help when they're trying to take control. For nearly an hour, they continued presenting their case. Every argument sounded carefully rehearsed. "You shouldn't live alone. The house is too much work. You need more support. You'll be safer there." On the surface, everything sounded reasonable, but something didn't feel genuine. Then Michael accidentally revealed the truth. "We've already spoken to a realtor." I stared at him. "A realtor?" His eyes widened. He immediately realized his mistake. Jason looked horrified. The room fell silent. Finally, I asked the obvious question. "You already spoke to someone about selling my house." Neither answered. That silence told me everything. The decision had already been made. Without me, without my permission, without my knowledge. At that moment, I understood something important. This was never about my well-being. This was about access. Access to the house, access to the business, access to my assets, access to my money. And suddenly, every strange conversation from the past year made sense. Every visit, every suggestion, every concern, it had all been leading to this. Yet instead of arguing, I simply nodded, and that surprised them. Michael looked relieved. Jason smiled. Neither realized what I was actually thinking, because 6 months earlier, I had already prepared for this exact moment. 3 weeks later, they moved me into the nursing home. The entire process happened remarkably fast, almost as if they had been waiting for the opportunity. The facility itself wasn't terrible. Clean rooms, friendly staff, nice grounds. The problem wasn't the building, the problem was the betrayal. As I sat on my new bed watching my sons carry in boxes, I felt something I had never experienced before. Loneliness. Not because I was alone, because I wasn't. There were dozens of residents, nurses, employees, visitors, but I had never felt further away from my own family. Before leaving, Michael gave me a quick hug. Jason shook my hand, a handshake, from his own father. Then they walked out the door. I watched them leave through the window. Neither looked back, not once. And in that moment, I knew something. I would never view them the same way again. The first week passed slowly. Then something interesting happened. The visits stopped, immediately. No weekend visit, no Sunday lunch, no family gathering, nothing. The same sons who claimed they were concerned about me suddenly became too busy to visit. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. Meanwhile, I started receiving updates from Daniel. The plan was working perfectly. Every document had been completed, every transfer finalized, every protection in place. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. Then one afternoon, Daniel called with unexpected news. "Robert, you're going to want to hear this." I sat down. "What happened?" He chuckled softly. "Both of your sons have taken out new mortgages." I nearly laughed. "Really?" "Oh yes. According to Daniel, both men had purchased expensive properties, much larger than they could comfortably afford. Luxury homes, luxury lifestyles, luxury debt, and apparently they were very confident about the future. Too confident, because they believed a large inheritance was eventually coming, an inheritance they were already mentally spending. I thanked Daniel for the information and hung up. Then I sat quietly in my room for a long time. It's strange how greed works. The more people expect, the more entitled they become. Michael and Jason weren't building their future through hard work. They were building it around assumptions assumptions about my money, assumptions about my estate, assumptions about what would belong to them someday, and those assumptions were about to become very expensive mistakes. Months passed. The nursing home staff became like family. I made friends, played cards, attended events. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who actually enjoyed my company, people who wanted nothing from me, no inheritance, no loans, no assets, just conversation. Ironically, I felt more valued in that nursing home than I had felt around my own sons. Then came Christmas, and that's when everything finally changed, because while Michael and Jason couldn't find time to visit their father, they somehow found time to ask for money, again. The phone call arrived on Christmas Eve, and what Michael asked for next would trigger the beginning of his downfall. The Christmas phone call. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow covering the grounds of the nursing home. Inside the dining hall, decorations hung from every wall. A large Christmas tree stood near the entrance. Families visited residents. Grandchildren laughed. Holiday music played softly through the speakers. For most people, it was a joyful day. For me, it was a reminder that my own sons hadn't visited in nearly 7 weeks. Not one phone call, not one lunch, not one afternoon visit, nothing. Ironically, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was simply accepting reality. The illusion had finally disappeared. At around 3 o'clock that afternoon, my phone rang. The screen displayed Michael's name. I stared at it for several seconds, then answered. "Merry Christmas, Dad." His voice sounded unusually cheerful, almost nervous. "Merry Christmas, Michael." There was a brief pause. Then he cleared his throat. "Dad, I actually wanted to ask you something." "Of course you do," I thought. Whenever my sons remembered I existed, money was usually involved. "What is it?" Michael sighed dramatically. "We've had some unexpected expenses." I remained silent. "Our mortgage payment increased." Still silent. "The kids need braces." Nothing. Then came the real request. "We were wondering if you could help us out financially." There it was, the reason for the call. Not because it was Christmas, not because he missed me, not because he wanted to hear my voice. Money, always money. I glanced around the dining hall. Dozens of families were celebrating together. Yet my own son had called me like a bank manager. "How much?" His answer nearly made me laugh. $20,000. $20,000, as casually as someone asking to borrow a lawnmower. For a moment I said nothing. Then I replied, "No." The silence on the other end became immediate. "What?" "No." Michael sounded genuinely shocked, as if refusal had never occurred to him. "Dad, it's Christmas. And? We need help." I took a slow breath. "Michael, when was the last time you visited me?" Silence. "When was the last time you asked how I was doing?" More silence. "When was the last time you called without wanting something?" His voice became defensive. "That's not fair." I almost laughed. Not fair. The man who hadn't visited his father in nearly 2 months was talking about fairness. The conversation ended shortly afterward, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty, because saying no had finally become necessary. 2 days later, Jason called. The conversation was almost identical. Different voice, same request, different excuse, same entitlement. He wanted $15,000. I told him no. And just like his brother, he reacted as though I had committed a crime. That week, Daniel called. "Robert, I think you'll find this interesting." I smiled. "What happened?" "Your sons have accumulated a significant amount of debt." That got my attention. Daniel continued. "Luxury vehicles, credit cards, home renovations, vacation loans." Apparently both men had spent years living far beyond their means. Why? Because they believed future inheritance money would solve everything. The problem was simple. They had built their lives around an assumption, and assumptions can be dangerous, especially when they're wrong. Then Daniel told me something even more interesting. Both mortgages had recently been refinanced through his bank, and because of that, he had seen documents neither son expected anyone else to see. Income statements, debt obligations, payment schedules. The numbers weren't good, not good at all. "They're stretched thin." "How thin?" Daniel paused. "One major financial setback and both families are in trouble." I looked out the window. Snow continued falling outside. Part of me felt sorry for them. But another part remembered something important. Every warning had been ignored, every lesson had been rejected, every opportunity for gratitude had been wasted. For years, I had tried helping them. Nothing changed. Then, 3 weeks later, the first crack appeared. Michael lost a major contract at work. A contract worth thousands of dollars. His income dropped immediately. A month later, Jason's landscaping company suffered a terrible winter season. Business slowed dramatically. Bills piled up, pressure increased, and suddenly those large mortgage payments no longer seemed manageable. The phone calls started again, more frequent this time, more desperate. But something had changed. The confidence was gone. The entitlement remained. Yet beneath it, I could hear fear, real fear. One evening, Michael called and got straight to the point. "Dad, we need to meet." "Why?" "It's important." His voice sounded strained, very strained. I already knew where this was going. Money, again. We agreed to meet the following week, not at my room, not at a restaurant, not at their homes. They wanted to meet at Daniel Whitmore's bank. That surprised me, until Michael explained why. Apparently, both brothers believed the bank might help them secure additional financing. What they didn't know was that Daniel had already informed me about the appointment, and he had a very specific reason for wanting me there. A reason connected to the plan we had created nearly a year earlier, a plan that was finally ready. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., downtown Columbus. By the time that meeting ended, my sons would learn a truth they never expected. The homes they were struggling to pay for, the homes they proudly called theirs, the homes they believed represented their success, were about to become the center of the biggest shock of their lives. And the man delivering that shock would be the banker himself, the bankers' meeting. Tuesday morning arrived cold and grey. I woke before sunrise, not because I was nervous, because I had been waiting for this day for nearly a year, the day everything would finally come into the open, the day my sons would learn that actions have consequences. At 9:45 a.m., I entered Whitmore Financial Bank. Daniel was already waiting. He greeted me warmly and escorted me into a private conference room. A long oak table occupied the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Columbus. Everything about the room felt professional, serious, permanent, exactly the kind of place where life-changing conversations happen. Daniel closed the door. "You ready?" I smiled. "I've never been more ready." 10 minutes later, Michael and Jason arrived. Both looked exhausted. The confidence they once carried had disappeared. Dark circles under their eyes suggested many sleepless nights. For the first time in years, they looked worried, very worried. Michael sat down first, Jason followed. Neither noticed the slight smile on Daniel's face. Michael immediately got to the point. "Mr. Whitmore, we're hoping the bank can help us." Daniel nodded politely. "What kind of help?" Michael opened a folder. Inside were financial statements, mortgage balances, credit card debts, loan information. The numbers were ugly, very ugly. For nearly 30 minutes, both brothers explained their situation. Cash flow problems, business setbacks, unexpected expenses, missed opportunities. As they talked, I noticed something interesting. Not once did they mention personal responsibility. Everything was someone else's fault. The economy, their employers, the market, interest rates, bad luck, anyone but themselves. Finally, Daniel folded his hands. "I understand," Michael immediately leaned forward. "So can you approve additional financing?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a file sitting on the table, a file I recognized immediately. The file, the one we had prepared months earlier. My sons noticed it too. Jason frowned. "What is that?" Daniel calmly adjusted his glasses. "Before we discuss additional financing, there are several ownership matters we need to clarify." The room became quiet. Michael looked confused. "Ownership matters?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Then he opened the file. Everything changed. "According to our records, there appears to be a misunderstanding regarding certain assets." Michael exchanged a glance with Jason. Neither understood where this was going. I did. And suddenly I felt completely calm. Daniel continued. "Specifically, the properties connected to your current mortgage agreements." Jason frowned. "What about them?" Daniel slowly slid several documents across the table. The brothers began reading. At first, nothing happened. Then their expressions changed. Confusion, disbelief, shock. Michael looked up first. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. Jason grabbed another document. His face turned pale. What is this? Daniel remained composed. It's exactly what it appears to be. For nearly a full minute, neither brother spoke. They simply stared at the paperwork, trying to understand, trying to process, trying to convince themselves they were reading it incorrectly. Unfortunately for them, they weren't. Every document was legitimate. Every signature was valid. Every transaction had been completed legally. Michael finally looked toward me, for the first time all morning. "Dad." His voice barely worked. I simply nodded. Daniel continued explaining. Months earlier, while my sons were busy planning my future, I had been protecting mine. Every step had been completed with legal oversight. Every asset had been structured carefully. Every decision had been documented. And now the truth sat directly in front of them. The homes they believed represented independence. The homes they believed proved their success. The homes they had proudly shown to friends and relatives were tied to arrangements they had never bothered to fully understand, because they had assumed they already knew everything. Assumption. The most expensive mistake of all. Jason suddenly pushed back his chair. "This can't be happening." Daniel calmly replied, "I'm afraid it already has." Michael looked physically sick. Years of confidence disappeared in seconds. Years of entitlement collapsed under the weight of reality. Then came the question I had been waiting to hear, the question neither brother ever imagined asking. Michael looked directly at me. His voice shook. "Dad, why?" For several moments, nobody spoke. Then I answered, "Because you stopped treating me like your father." The room became silent, painfully silent. I continued, "You treated me like an inheritance." Neither interrupted, neither denied it, because deep down, they knew it was true. "You moved me into a nursing home. You stopped visiting. You only called when you needed money. You talked about my death like it was a business opportunity." Michael lowered his eyes. Jason stared at the floor, and for the first time in years, neither man had an excuse. The truth was too obvious, too undeniable, too painful. Daniel quietly stood. "I'll give your family some privacy." Then he left the room, closing the door behind him. Now it was just the three of us, a father and two sons finally facing the consequences of their choices. What happened next would change our family forever, the truth they never expected. The conference room remained silent after Daniel left. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Michael stared at the documents. Jason kept reading the same page over and over, as if repeating it enough times would somehow change what was written there. It didn't. The truth remained the same. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "Dad, when did you do this?" I leaned back in my chair. "About 10 months ago." Both men looked stunned. 10 months. Long before they moved me into the nursing home, long before they stopped visiting, long before they started asking for more money. In other words, before they could accuse me of acting out of revenge, because this wasn't revenge, this was protection. Protection from exactly the behavior they had eventually shown. Jason rubbed his forehead. "I don't understand." I nodded toward the paperwork. "Then let me explain. For years I had helped both of my sons financially. College tuition, vehicles, business loans, emergency expenses, wedding costs, down payments. The list was endless. Whenever they needed help, I was there. Not because they earned it, because I loved them. But as time passed, something changed. Help became expectation. Expectation became entitlement, and entitlement became greed. So when Daniel and I met almost a year earlier, we created a plan, a legal plan, a responsible plan, a plan designed to protect everything Susan and I had spent our lives building. Michael swallowed hard. "Dad," I raised my hand. "No, you're going to listen." For the first time in years, both sons remained quiet. "You spent years assuming my money already belonged to you. Neither denied it. You talked about my estate before I was even gone. Still silent. You made decisions based on an inheritance that wasn't yours." Jason looked down. His face was filled with shame, and perhaps for the first time, he was seeing the situation from my perspective. I continued, While you were planning what you'd do with my assets, I was planning how to protect them. The room became quiet again. Then Michael asked the question that had been bothering him from the beginning. So who owns the houses? I looked directly at him, then at Jason, and answered calmly, I do. Both men froze, even though they had already read the documents. Hearing the words spoken aloud hit differently, harder, more personally. Michael's face turned white. Jason looked as though the air had been punched out of his lungs. The properties had been purchased through a legal structure Daniel helped establish, a structure connected to family assets, a structure neither son fully understood because neither son had bothered to read the details. They simply signed paperwork, made assumptions, and moved on. Assumptions that were now destroying them. Michael suddenly stood up. This isn't fair. The words echoed through this conference room. I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Fair? Michael looked shocked. You think this is fair? I slowly stood as well. You abandoned your father. Silence. You treated me like an obstacle. More silence. You visited only when you needed money. Neither answered. You placed me in a nursing home and disappeared. The room became so quiet that I could hear traffic outside. Then I said something that neither son expected. The homes aren't the real issue. Michael frowned. What do you mean? The real issue is that you stopped being my sons. That hurt them. I could see it immediately. Because unlike financial problems, that accusation couldn't be blamed on anyone else. No economy, no interest rates, no bad luck. Just choices. Their choices. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then something surprising happened. Jason started crying. Not dramatic tears, not attention-seeking tears, real tears. The kind that come when someone finally sees the truth. I never wanted things to end up like this. His voice cracked. For the first time that day, I believed him, because Jason had always followed Michael's lead. He wasn't innocent, far from it, but he wasn't the mastermind either. Michael remained silent, proud, defensive, angry. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed immediately. Fear, pure fear. He answered, "Hello?" The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, he looked devastated. What happened? Jason asked. Michael slowly lowered the phone. The mortgage company called. Nobody spoke. They're reviewing our financial situation. My heart sank slightly, not because I enjoyed seeing my son suffer, because reality had finally arrived, and reality doesn't negotiate. For years, Michael built a lifestyle around expectations. Now those expectations were collapsing, one by one. The consequences had begun, and unfortunately for him, the worst news was still coming, because later that afternoon, Daniel would return to the conference room carrying another folder, a folder containing information neither son knew existed, information connected to their mother's final wishes, a letter Susan wrote before she passed away, a letter neither of them had ever seen, and once that letter was read aloud, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. Their mother's final letter. The conference room remained silent after Michael ended the call. Neither son looked at me. Both stared at the table, as if avoiding eye contact could somehow avoid the truth. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Daniel returned, carrying a dark leather folder. The moment I saw it, I recognized it, immediately, because I hadn't opened it in almost 8 years, not since Susan's funeral. Daniel placed it carefully on the table, then sat down. Michael looked confused. Jason wiped his eyes. "What is that?" Michael asked. Daniel glanced toward me. I nodded. "It's time." Daniel slowly opened the folder. Inside was a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front stopped both brothers cold. Their mother's handwriting. Susan Harrison. For a moment, nobody spoke. Jason looked as though he had seen a ghost. Michael's jaw tightened. I felt my own chest grow heavy. Even after all these years, seeing Susan's handwriting affected me. Before she passed away, Susan had spent months organizing family documents, letters, instructions, personal messages, things she wanted certain people to know. One of those letters had been written specifically for our sons. Daniel carefully removed the envelope. "Your father asked me to keep this secure until the appropriate time." Jason's voice trembled. "Mom wrote us a letter?" "Yes." Neither son knew such a letter existed. Susan never told them. She only told me, and she made one request: only give them this letter if they ever lose their way. At the time, I thought she was worrying unnecessarily. Now I realized she had understood our sons better than I ever did. Daniel unfolded the letter, then began reading. My dear boys, if you're hearing this letter, it means your father believes you need to remember something important. First, I want you to know that I love you more than words can ever express. Nothing will ever change that. Not distance, not mistakes, not time. But love without honesty isn't love at all, so I need to be honest. The room became completely silent. Daniel continued. When your father and I started our life together, we had almost nothing. There were months when we worried about paying bills, years when we worked every day without vacations. Everything we built came from sacrifice, not luck, not inheritance, not shortcuts. Sacrifice. Michael lowered his eyes. Jason stared at the floor. Daniel continued reading. My greatest fear was never that you would fail. My greatest fear was that success would make you forget gratitude. A painful silence followed, then another paragraph. If you ever begin treating people as resources instead of family, if you ever value money more than relationships, if you ever start counting an inheritance before your father is gone, then you have lost sight of everything we tried to teach you. Jason began crying again, this time harder. Michael looked as though someone had punched him. Every sentence felt personal, because every sentence described exactly what had happened. Daniel continued, Your father is the most generous man I have ever known. Too generous sometimes. He would give away his last dollar to help someone he loved. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never assume that what belongs to him automatically belongs to you. The words landed like a hammer. Michael's hands began shaking, because for years that was exactly what he had assumed. Daniel turned to the final page and read the last paragraph. If one day you find yourselves facing consequences for your choices, don't waste time looking for someone to blame. Look in the mirror, because character is revealed when nobody is watching, and true wealth isn't measured by money, it's measured by how you treat the people who love you, especially your father. Take care of him. One day you'll wish you had more time. Love always, Mom. When Daniel finished reading, nobody spoke, not immediately. The room was filled with a different kind of pain now, not financial pain, regret. The most expensive pain of all. Several minutes passed. Then Jason quietly asked a question. Dad, did Mom really think this would happen? I looked at him. A sad smile crossed my face. She hoped it wouldn't. Jason covered his face. Michael sat completely motionless. Then something unexpected happened. The strongest person in the room finally broke. Tears appeared in Michael's eyes, real tears, the kind he probably hadn't shed since childhood. For years he had blamed everyone else. Today there was nobody left to blame. The truth stood directly in front of him, and the truth was painful, because their mother had seen this possibility long before any of us. The room remained silent for a long time. Finally, Michael looked at me, not at the paperwork, not at the mortgages, not at the assets, at me, for the first time in years. Dad, his voice cracked, I'm sorry. Those two words changed everything. Not because they fixed the damage, they didn't, not even close, but because they were the first honest words either of my sons had spoken in a very long time. The question was no longer whether they were sorry. The question was whether they were willing to change, and that answer would reveal itself sooner than anyone expected, because just 3 days later, something happened at the nursing home that neither Michael nor Jason saw coming. Something that would force them to make a choice between greed and family. The visit that changed everything. 3 days after the meeting at the bank, I was sitting in the nursing home's library reading a history book. Outside, snow covered the grounds. Inside, everything felt peaceful. For the first time in months, my mind was calm. The truth was finally out. No more pretending, no more assumptions, no more lies. Then the receptionist appeared in the doorway. Mr. Harrison? I looked up. Yes? You have visitors. Visitors. The word surprised me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then I walked into the lobby and froze. Michael was standing there. Beside him stood Jason. For a moment, nobody moved, because none of us knew what to say. This wasn't a meeting about money. There were no documents, no requests, no negotiations, just family, something we hadn't been in a very long time. Jason finally spoke first. We brought lunch. I looked down. They were carrying takeout from my favorite barbecue restaurant, the same restaurant Susan and I used to visit every anniversary. My throat tightened because they remembered, after all these years, they remembered. We sat together in a small, private dining room. At first, the conversation felt awkward, almost uncomfortable. Nobody knew how to bridge years of disappointment in a single afternoon. Then Jason quietly asked a question. "Dad, what's your favorite memory of Mom?" The question caught me off guard. For several seconds, I couldn't answer. Then I smiled and started talking. I told them about the day Susan and I met, our first apartment. The old pickup truck that barely started. The years we struggled. The dreams we shared. For nearly 2 hours, we talked about her. And something remarkable happened. Nobody mentioned money, not once. When lunch ended, Michael remained seated. He looked nervous. Then he said something I never expected to hear. "Dad, I owe you an apology." The room became quiet. Michael continued. "I spent years acting like I deserved everything." He looked down. "I don't. No excuses, no blaming, no defensiveness, just honesty." For the first time in years, I could see the little boy Susan and I had raised, not the entitled adult he had become, the son underneath. Jason nodded. I was just as bad. Neither of them tried minimizing what happened. Neither tried rewriting history. And because of that, their words carried weight, real weight. Then Michael reached into his coat pocket. "What is that?" I asked. He placed a folded piece of paper on the table. A list. A list of what? He smiled sadly. "Every time you helped me financially." I unfolded it. The list seemed endless. College tuition, car repairs, wedding expenses, business loans, medical bills, emergency funds, down payments, thousands upon thousands of dollars. Michael shook his head. "I never realized how much you did for me." I looked at him. No parent keeps score. His eyes filled with tears. Maybe they should. That statement hit me harder than anything else he had said, because for the first time he understood, not the money, the sacrifice, the years, the effort, the love behind it. As the afternoon ended, both sons stood. Then something happened that surprised everyone. Michael hugged me, not the quick, awkward hugs from the past, a real hug, the kind sons give fathers when they finally understand how much time has been lost. And for the first time since Susan died, I felt a small piece of our family beginning to heal. But life wasn't finished teaching lessons yet, because the following week another surprise arrived, a surprise that would test whether my sons had truly changed or whether this was simply temporary guilt. The call came from Daniel, and the moment I answered, I knew something serious had happened. "Robert," he said, "you need to come to the bank." "What happened?" There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke 5 words. "Your wife left another instruction." I sat up immediately. Another instruction? Another secret after 8 years? That seemed impossible. Yet Daniel sounded completely serious, and what we discovered inside Susan's final estate documents would affect every member of our family, including my grandchildren. Susan's final gift. The moment I hung up with Daniel, my heart started racing. Another instruction? Another document? After all these years? It didn't seem possible. Susan had always been organized, careful, thoughtful. But if she had left something else behind, there had to be a reason. The following morning, Michael and Jason picked me up from the nursing home. Neither son knew why Daniel wanted us at the bank. Neither did I. As we drove through downtown Columbus, silence filled the car. Not uncomfortable silence, thoughtful silence. The kind that happens when people are trying to rebuild something fragile. Trust. When we arrived, Daniel greeted us personally. He looked unusually serious. That immediately caught my attention. "Daniel," I said, "what's going on?" He motioned toward a conference room. "I think it's better if everyone hears this together." That statement made all 3 of us nervous. Once seated, Daniel placed another folder on the table. This folder looked older, much older. The edges were worn, the paper slightly faded. Daniel opened it carefully. Then he looked directly at me. "Robert, 3 months before Susan passed away, she updated part of her estate plan." I frowned. "I don't remember that." "You weren't supposed to." That surprised me. Very few things about Susan surprised me anymore. This did. Daniel continued. She instructed our office to keep these documents sealed unless certain circumstances occurred. Michael leaned forward. What circumstances? Daniel glanced at both brothers. Family conflict involving inheritance or financial disputes. The room went silent. Even Susan had anticipated this, years before it happened. Daniel removed several papers from the folder, then a small handwritten note. The handwriting was unmistakable. Susan's, again. Jason swallowed hard. Michael looked away. The loss still hurt all of us, even after 8 years. Daniel unfolded the note, then began reading. My family. If this letter is being read, it means something has gone wrong. Not with money, not with property, with relationships. And if that's true, then I need all of you to remember why your father and I worked so hard in the first place. Daniel paused, then continued. We never built our lives to create rich children. We built our lives to create good people. The room became completely silent. Every word felt heavier than the last. Wealth is useful. Property is useful, money is useful, but none of those things matter if a family loses its heart. Jason wiped his eyes. Michael stared at the table. Daniel continued. For that reason, I have left one final instruction. Everyone sat up straighter, including me. What instruction? Even I didn't know. Daniel smiled slightly, then opened another document. This instruction concerns the grandchildren. The grandchildren? Now everyone looked confused. Daniel continued. Years ago, Susan created an education and opportunity trust. My jaw dropped. What? Michael looked equally shocked. Jason blinked repeatedly. Daniel nodded. She funded it gradually over several years. The room went silent. None of us had known, not one. Daniel smiled. Your wife was very good at keeping secrets. That sounded exactly like Susan. Daniel continued. The trust has grown significantly over time. How much? Michael asked. Daniel looked at the document, then answered. Just over $2 million. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. $2 million. The number seemed unreal. Jason looked stunned. Michael nearly fell back in his chair. I couldn't believe it either. Susan had quietly built a future for our grandchildren, without telling anyone, without seeking recognition, without expecting praise. That was exactly who she was. Then Daniel raised a finger. There's one condition. Immediately, the room became serious again. Michael frowned. What condition? Daniel looked directly at both brothers. The trust cannot be accessed if family members are fighting over inheritance, silence, or attempting to pressure elderly relatives regarding assets, more silence, or engaging in conduct that damages family relationships. Michael slowly closed his eyes. Jason looked down. The meaning couldn't have been clearer. Susan had protected the grandchildren from adult greed, even years after her death. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Then Daniel delivered the final surprise. The trustees are your father, he pointed toward me, and Emily Harrison. Emily, my granddaughter? I smiled immediately. Emily had always been different, kind, responsible, thoughtful, the kind of person Susan would trust. Jason laughed softly through his tears. Mom really thought of everything. Yes, Daniel replied. I believe she did. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Michael quietly looked at me. Dad. Yes? If Mom could see us right now. His voice cracked. She'd be disappointed. I thought about that carefully, then shook my head. No. Both sons looked surprised. I smiled. She'd be disappointed in some of our choices. I paused. But she'd be proud that we're finally fixing them. For the first time all morning, everyone smiled. A real smile, not forced, not polite, real. And for the first time since Susan passed away, it felt like our family was moving in the right direction. But none of us knew that the biggest test was still ahead, because 2 months later, a medical emergency would force Michael and Jason to prove whether their transformation was genuine, and this time, money wouldn't be able to help them. The night everything changed. 2 months passed after our meeting at the bank. For the first time in years, things felt different. Not perfect, but different. Michael visited every Saturday. Jason came every Wednesday evening. Sometimes they came together. Sometimes they came separately. But they came, and that mattered, because showing up is easy when things are good. The real test is whether people show up after they've made mistakes. One afternoon, Emily visited the nursing home. She brought coffee and one of Susan's old photo albums. For nearly an hour, we sat together looking through pictures. Her grandmother at 23, our first apartment, the boys as children, birthday parties, camping trips, family vacations, memories. As we turned another page, Emily suddenly smiled. "Grandma always looked happy around you." I laughed. "That's because she was smarter than I was." Emily smiled. "No, it's because she loved you." The words stayed with me long after she left. That evening, I felt unusually tired. At first, I blamed my age. 72 years old isn't young. After dinner, I returned to my room. Then something strange happened. My chest tightened. A sharp pressure spread across my shoulders. Suddenly, breathing became difficult, very difficult. I sat down, then immediately stood up again. Panic started creeping in. I knew this feeling. Years earlier, a friend described the exact same symptoms. Heart attack. The emergency button beside my bed suddenly became the most important object in the room. I pressed it. Within seconds, nurses arrived, then paramedics. Everything became a blur. Bright lights, voices, questions, sirens. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital room. Machines beeped softly beside me. The room smelled like disinfectant. For several moments, I couldn't remember where I was. Then I saw someone sitting beside the bed. Michael. His eyes were red. He looked exhausted. When he noticed I was awake, he immediately stood. "Dad." His voice cracked. I looked around. Where am I? The hospital. I nodded slowly, then noticed another figure asleep in a chair. Jason, still wearing work clothes, still sitting beside my bed. I looked back at Michael. "How long have you been here?" He looked away. 2 days. 2 days. I stared at him. "Both of you?" He nodded. Neither brother had left except to shower. The doctors later explained what happened. A serious cardiac event, not a massive heart attack, but close enough to scare everyone, including me. For the next several days, my hospital room remained full. Michael visited, Jason visited, Emily visited, my grandchildren visited. The room was never empty, and that's when I realized something. The biggest revenge isn't watching people suffer. The biggest revenge is watching people finally become better. One evening, while Jason was helping me eat dinner, I asked a question. "Why are you doing this?" He looked confused. "What do you mean? You've spent almost every day here." Jason lowered his eyes, then smiled sadly. "Because I wasted too much time already." The answer hit me harder than anything else, because it was honest, painfully honest. The following afternoon, I overheard something unexpected. A nurse approached Michael near the hallway. "I wish all families cared this much." Michael looked embarrassed. "If you'd seen us a year ago, you wouldn't say that." The nurse smiled. "People can change." Michael didn't answer, but I saw tears forming in his eyes, and in that moment, I knew something important. The lesson had finally reached him. Not through money, not through legal documents, not through consequences, through fear. The fear of losing someone before it's too late. After a week, doctors finally approved my release. The family gathered outside the hospital entrance. Everyone looked relieved, including me. Then Michael surprised everyone. "Dad, you're not going back to the nursing home." I frowned. "What?" Jason nodded. "We already discussed it." I looked confused. Michael continued. "We found a solution." "What solution?" The brothers exchanged a glance. Then Michael smiled. "The family takes turns." I blinked. "What?" "You spent your entire life taking care of us." Jason smiled. "Now it's our turn." For several seconds, I couldn't speak, because this wasn't guilt, this wasn't obligation, this was love, the kind of love I thought had disappeared years ago. As we stood together outside the hospital, I looked toward the sky, and for the first time in a very long time, I thought about Susan. I imagined her watching, smiling, not because our family was perfect, because it was healing. But one final surprise still awaited us, a surprise hidden inside the old Harrison family home, a discovery that would bring our story full circle and reveal one last message Susan left behind. 3 weeks after leaving the hospital, I stood in front of the Harrison family home, the same home Susan and I had built together more than 40 years earlier. For the first time in nearly a year, I was back, not because I owned it, not because of money, because it was home. The old oak tree still stood in the front yard. The porch swing Susan loved still hung near the entrance. And as I walked through the front door, memories rushed back from every corner of the house. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family dinners, the life we built together. Michael and Jason had spent the previous week preparing everything, cleaning, repairing, organizing, making sure the house was safe, not because they wanted something, because they wanted me home. The difference mattered a lot. That afternoon, Emily arrived carrying several storage boxes from the attic. "What are those?" I asked. She smiled. "Grandma's things." Immediately, everyone's attention shifted. Over the next few hours, we carefully sorted through old photographs, letters, journals, and family keepsakes. Each item seemed to tell a story. Then Emily discovered something unusual, a small wooden box hidden inside an old sewing cabinet. The box was locked, and attached to it was a note. My heart stopped the moment I saw the handwriting. Susan, again. The room became silent. Jason slowly picked up the note. "What does it say?" I adjusted my glasses, then read aloud. "For my family, open together." Nobody spoke. The atmosphere instantly changed. Michael carefully opened the box. Inside were dozens of old photographs, several letters, and one sealed envelope. The envelope simply read, "Open when our family finds its way back." Tears immediately filled my eyes, because somehow, even years ago, Susan had anticipated everything. Michael carefully opened the envelope, then handed the letter to me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, and I began reading. "My beautiful family, if you're reading this letter together, then something wonderful has happened. It means you've remembered what matters most, not money, not property, not inheritance, family. The world will always offer opportunities to argue over possessions, but possessions aren't what make a family rich. Love does, forgiveness does, time spent together does. If Robert is reading this, I want him to know something." My voice nearly broke. The room became completely silent. "Robert, you were the greatest gift of my life. Thank you for every sacrifice, every late night, every difficult decision, every dream we built together. You gave our family a wonderful life, and I hope you finally learned something I spent years trying to teach you. You don't have to carry everything alone." At that point, I had to stop reading for a moment. The tears wouldn't stop. Eventually, I continued. "To Michael and Jason, you don't have to be perfect. You only have to be better than yesterday. Take care of each other. Take care of your families. And most importantly, take care of your father. One day you'll realize how quickly time disappears. Don't waste what remains." By now, nobody in the room had dry eyes. Even Emily was crying. The final paragraph was short, very short, but it became the most important part of the entire letter. "Success isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by who sits beside you when life becomes difficult. Choose people over possessions. Every single time. Love always, Mom." When I finished reading, the room remained silent. Not awkward silence, grateful silence. The kind of silence people share when they know they've experienced something special. Then Michael stood up, walked across the room, and hugged his brother. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jason joined him, and before I knew it, all of us were standing together. 3 generations, one family, finally reunited. Months later, life looked very different. The nursing home was behind me. Michael focused on repairing his finances responsibly. Jason rebuilt his business without shortcuts. Emily began preparing for college using the educational trust Susan had secretly created. And every Sunday evening, our family gathered for dinner. No excuses, no missed visits, no discussions about inheritance, just family, exactly as Susan wanted. Looking back now, people often ask whether I regret what happened. The betrayal, the nursing home, the painful lessons. The answer surprises them. No, because sometimes people need consequences before they can appreciate what they have. My sons nearly lost their father, and in the process they found themselves. As for the mortgages, they eventually paid every dollar honestly. No shortcuts, no rescue plans, no inheritance assumptions, and they were proud of that. More proud than they ever would have been receiving something for free. Today, when I sit on the porch swing Susan loved so much, I often think about the lesson hidden inside this entire story. The lesson my sons learned the hard way, the The lesson Susan understood long before any of us. Money can build houses, but it cannot build families. Only love can do that. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you, it's giving them the opportunity to become better than they were before. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from today. Here at Family Revenge Chronicles, we're reminded every day that truth eventually comes to light, actions have consequences, and family is worth fighting for. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and take care of the people who love you.